So hello guys, welcome. Today we're going to tackle the motor control and learning for exercise and sport and dance. So motor learning describes the relatively permanent changes associated with practice or experience that govern a person's capability for generating a motor skill. Although the outcome of motor learning is comparatively permanent, the motor system remains capable of change throughout the lifespan. So most people relate motor learning to acquisition of skills. Motor learning also refers to changing aspect of motor control, such as how we use our core support during turns on how to improve the aesthetic appearance of a balance. So also motor learning of higher skills can be based in motor program based theory. So which emphasize the rules of structure existing in the brain that can direct a general group or class of movements. For example, if the dancers are taught how to do plies in the first position, they can apply the rules to the plies in the other leg position. So motor learning is a higher skill level and can also be based on the system theory, which emphasize interaction with the movement. Just for example, the young children in the classes can learn how to jump by jumping over real or imaginary object. So next we have here the learning performance distinction. So the first one is the problem with observation. So learning performance distinction refers to the well-established finding that performance measure during acquisition may ask the true degree of learning that has occurred. So the problem with this assumption is that what we see when observing performance is not always an accurate or reflecting of learning. So major problem with assuming that performance is accurate reflection of a learning is such thinking leads to a further assumption, but the learning is the best facilitated when it accompanied by good performance. Next is the performance variables. So the problem in relying to exclusively on performance observation when assessing learning is that performance is a temporary expression of a learner's ability to execute skills. As such, it is a reflection both of the person learned capacity to perform these skills and also to the presence of temporary features inherent within the practice or performance context. These temporary factors are called performance variables and include instruction, environmental, and also learning characteristics. So the last but not the least in the performance distinction is instructional characteristic. So instructional characteristic is that includes just as factor as a type of practice schedule, the order of which variation skills are sequenced, the relativity or restfulness of practice, the use of simplification techniques such as practice, type of instruction provided to the learners, and the amount of type of feedback given to the learners. So here, defining learning and performances. So performance. So performance is observable behavior. It is a qualitative or quantitative assessment of what we can observe during the examination of the skills or examination of the test. If you see someone bicycle across of the campus, service a tennis ball, or swim laps in a pool, you are observing their performance of this skill. So basically, didala naman siya, guys, didala naman siya intindihan, no? Based on performance ang naman na makikita natin sa field or pools or kahit saan lang basta nagagamit sila ng skills. So here, meron sa performance may tatlong category which is observable behavior and also they represent only temporary changes behavior and the last influenced by performance variables. So the next one is learning. So learning is a relatively stable change in a performance resulting from practices or experiences. It is the process by which people acquire a new capacity to perform a skills which is inferred from performance observation. So we infer that learning has occurred or has not based upon observation of performance. We infer that the tennis player has demonstrated of his or her learning of the tennis skills in three ways. So we have the three or the 1 to 3 ways of the player. So the player performance improved over time. Number 2, the improvement resulted from practice. Is the last. Number 3, the player improved skill level was able add to some degree at least permanent. So the learning here is that the inferred from performance cannot be observed, relatively permanent changes in behavior, and lastly, not influenced by performance variables. So now we're going to move the assessing learning of measuring art. So we have here three measuring art, which is the acquisition, retention, and the transfer. So in the acquisition refers to the direct measurement of the performance experience. For example, in a laboratory experiment, a series of practice trials may be observed and the result for each trial measured are recorded. Next is the retention test. So retention test refers to performance measurement conducted subsequent to acquisition trials or observation. They provide sufficient time for any effects of performance variable acting during acquisition to dissipate. So next, the transfer. So the transfer test simply started. So a transfer test measuring how effectively a person can transfer the learning of a skill from one condition to another. So we have also here the performance curve. So in performance curve, you have linear, S-shape, and negative accelerating, and also have positive accelerating. So in linear curves, you have equal amounts of the number of trials during practices correspond to equal increase in performance measures. So next is the S-shape. So S-shape exhibit relatively slow rates of improvement both early and late, but accelerate the grades during the middle phase. Next is the negatively accelerating. So negatively accelerating exhibit diminished improvements in performance such as function of time or trial of practice. Next, the last is positive accelerating. So exhibit increasing performance into performance such as function on time or trials practices. Next, block party versus random practice. So block practice refers to the practice schedule in which the same skill rehearsed in repeatedly fashion. Next is the random practice. Random practice refers to the practice schedule in which different skill are rehearsed is an applicable trial to trial order. Next is the transfer of learning. So transfer learning have three target or specific functions. So number one is defining of transfer. Second one is the target skill and context. The last or the number 3 is the type of transfer. So in definition of transfer, transfer refers to an influence of learning on one skills on the performance of another skill. So number 2, target skills refers to the task a person wishes to able to perform as a result of practice. And we have here number 3, when experience in a one skill or in one context enhances the level performance in another skills or context, transfer is said to be positive. Overlearning and automaticity. So in overlearning and automaticity have four function, which is the law of practice, overlearning, automaticity, and refresher practice. So here we can see that here is explaining how transfers affects. So number one, application of transfer. So the skill transfer in sport, dance, and exercise. Next is transfer appropriate processing theory. So transfer related to similarities and required mental operation. So the last is identical elements theory. So here the transfer is related to the number of shared elements between skills. So now we're heading to our last topic for today. So the learning from play to deliberated practice. So we have here free play. So free play refers to any activity which is spontaneous, intrinsically motivated, enjoyable, and imaginative, are not pursued for any external rewards or goals. Next, we have here deliberated play. So the characteristic of the experience of participating, including movement and experimentation. So, we have also here structured play. So, ang characteristic niya is improvement of performance through other factors may also contribute to participation. Now, the last practice, which is deliberative practice. So, deliberative practice is defined as practice that is number one, effortful, number two, closely monitored and structured, and number three, directed toward the attainment of future goals rather than intermediate rewards. And also number four, the last is motivated by the desire to improve skill performances. So guys, thank you for learning and listening. Thank you and see you to the next video. Bye bye.